No one ever thought it would come to this. A fight so outrageous, so impossible, that the mere mention of it had the entire combat sports world in an uproar. Yet, here it was, a spectacle unlike anything before. Conor McGregor, the brash Irishman whose left hand had sent countless opponents crumbling, the man who once held 2 UFC titles simultaneously, was set to face Amanda Nunes, the Lioness, the most dominant female fighter the sport had ever seen. It wasn't just a clash of skill or power. It was a battle of legacy, pride, and the limits of human potential. Whispers had started as nothing more than fantasy, wild conversations between fight fans over beers. What if? They'd ask, half joking, as they debated who had the better striking, the better fight IQ, the better killer instinct. The hypothetical arguments raged on for years. But as McGregor's hunger for challenges pushed him toward unthinkable fights, and Nunes continued obliterating every opponent put in front of her, the idea took on a new weight. Some dismissed it immediately, scoffing at the notion that a man and a woman could ever meet inside the octagon under legitimate competition. Others leaned in, wondering if there was any woman who could break the walls of tradition and make history. Wasn't it Amanda? If there was any man brash enough to sign up for it, wasn't it Conor? Then, the unexpected happened. A press conference, a simple gathering meant to promote McGregor's latest business venture, turned into a seismic moment for the sport. A reporter, grinning as he threw the question out, asked Conor if he'd ever consider fighting Nunes. The room laughed until they saw his expression. That signature smirk flickered, but his eyes were serious. He leaned forward, tapped the microphone, and said, "If the fans want it, if the money's right, why not?" The headlines exploded. "Nunes, never one to back down," responded in kind. "If he wants it, I'm here," she told a journalist with that confident grin, the same one she had before knocking out legends like Ronda Rousey and Chris Cyborg. What had started as a joke was now in the hands of UFC's top executives, their phone lines flooded with reactions from fans, promoters, and commission officials. Could it happen? Would it? And if it did, who would actually win? The debates were endless. McGregor had fought in multiple weight classes, his power undeniable, his precision surgical. He had dismantled Jose Aldo in 13 seconds, boxed Floyd Mayweather, and headlined the biggest pay-per-views in UFC history. But Nunes wasn't just another fighter. She was a force of nature, a champion who dominated 2 divisions, someone who could knock out world-class opponents as easily as she could out-grapple them. Her kicks were like sledgehammers. Her hands carried the kind of power that stunned even those who thought they could handle it. Critics argued about weight disparity, about physiology, about whether the fight should even be sanctioned. But fight fans, they just wanted to see what would happen when 2 of the most dangerous fighters in the world, regardless of gender, stood toe-to-toe. It wasn't just about skill anymore. It was about ego, about proving something that had never been tested before. McGregor and Nunes both knew it. They had built their careers on defying expectations. Then, the contract was signed. Dana White, always the showman, made the announcement with a grin that told the world he knew exactly what he was doing. You wanted the biggest fight in history? You got it. The venue? Las Vegas. The rules? 5 rounds, championship stakes. The weight class? A catchweight both fighters could agree upon. The commission had debated long and hard before giving it the green light, but once it was official, the entire sports world held its breath. Training camps began in secrecy, but rumors leaked. McGregor was bringing in heavier sparring partners, adjusting his game plan for someone who could match his power shot for shot. Nunes, on the other hand, doubled down on her speed and movement, sharpening her defense for McGregor's lethal counters. Both had something to prove, and neither was willing to be the one who walked away in defeat. The build-up was electric. Every interview, every press conference was laced with tension. McGregor, always the master of psychological warfare, fired verbal shots at Nunes, reminding her that she had never faced someone with his precision, his movement, his ability to end a fight in a single moment. Nunes, unfazed, simply grinned and reminded him that every opponent she had faced thought they could handle her until they couldn't. As fight night approached, the anticipation reached a fever pitch. Tickets vanished in seconds. The world wasn't just watching, it was holding its breath, waiting for history to unfold. Two champions. Two legends. Only one could walk away victorious. And when they finally stepped into the cage, when the door slammed shut and the referee signaled the start, nothing could prepare the world for what was about to happen. The cage door locked with a metallic clang, and in that moment, the energy inside the arena shifted. Chants of McGregor clashed against roars of Nunes, a divided crowd fueling the atmosphere with an intensity few fights had ever seen. The fighters stood just feet apart, their eyes locked, their bodies poised, every muscle tense with anticipation. This wasn't just about power or precision anymore. This was about rewriting the very nature of combat sports. McGregor moved first, a slow, deliberate step forward, his hands low, that signature bounce in his stance. He feinted a jab, testing, measuring, reading Nunes like a puzzle he intended to solve. But she didn't bite. Instead, she smirked an almost taunting expression and fired a leg kick that cracked against McGregor's lead thigh. It wasn't just fast. It was brutal. A shot meant not just to score, but to warn. The crowd reacted instantly, a mix of cheers and gasps. McGregor shook his leg out, nodding, acknowledging the power behind it. He'd dealt with leg kicks before, but this one had weight behind it, a kind of force he hadn't felt in a long time. He stepped in again, this time throwing a left hand sharp, calculated, but none slipped just outside of range, countering with a jab that snapped McGregor's head back. It wasn't heavy, but it was a message. She was here to fight, not just survive. Seconds ticked away, both fighters settling into their rhythm. McGregor feinted again, looking to draw out a reaction, but Nunes was patient. Too patient. Then, she did something unexpected. She surged forward. A blitz, fast and explosive, closing distance in an instant. McGregor barely had time to react before a right hook crashed into his guard, followed by a left body kick that landed with a sickening thud. He stepped back, resetting, recalibrating. This wasn't like any opponent he had faced before. And then came the twist no one saw coming. McGregor pivoted, looking to create space, but just as he prepared to counter, his back foot slipped ever so slightly. It was barely noticeable to the untrained eye, but for a fighter at this level, it was a catastrophic mistake. In that split second, Nunes capitalized. She lunged forward, faking a right hand, but instead she changed levels. A takedown attempt. The crowd erupted in disbelief. McGregor had prepared for a striking battle, but now he was being dragged into Nona's world, a realm where she had ragdolled champions before. His instincts kicked in, arms digging for underhooks, but it was too late. Nunes had already secured a deep body lock, her strength undeniable. And then, with shocking ease, she lifted McGregor off his feet and slammed him onto the canvas. The moment his back hit the mat, the entire arena gasped. This wasn't just unexpected, it was a seismic shift in momentum. McGregor scrambled, trying to post up, trying to create space, but Nunes was relentless. She pinned him against the cage, raining down short, punishing strikes. Not full power, not reckless, but precise. Measured. McGregor, The man known for dictating fights was suddenly forced into a position he hadn't been in for years on his back, reacting, surviving. Seconds felt like hours as he struggled to break free, using his hips, his elbows, every ounce of technique he had drilled for moments like this. And just when it seemed like he might escape, Nunes shifted. She moved with eerie smoothness, sliding into a dominant position, trapping one of McGregor's arms while posturing up. McGregor gritted his teeth. He wasn't out of this yet. But for the first time in a long time, he was the one fighting against the current, trying to regain control before it was too late. And as the round ticked away, one thing became painfully clear: Amanda Nunes wasn't here to prove she could compete with Conor McGregor. She was here to win. McGregor's mind raced as he fought against the weight pressing down on him. Every second spent underneath Nunes was a second closer to disaster. His instincts screamed for a way out, but Nunes wasn't just holding position, she was making every moment count, throwing sharp elbows, peppering him with short punches, keeping him stuck against the unforgiving canvas. The Irishman's breath came sharp and fast, his muscles burning as he tried to break free. But Nunes had control, and worse, she knew it. Then, in a flash, McGregor made his move. Using every ounce of leverage he could muster, he twisted his hips, shoving his forearm into Nunes' shoulder and bridging hard. For the first time in the fight, space opened up. He wasn't free yet, but he had an opening. With a sudden explosion of movement, he rolled, twisting onto his side, then onto his knees. The crowd roared as McGregor rose, his back against the cage, shoving Nunes away just enough to reset. He was back on his feet, but the damage had been done. Nunes didn't hesitate. She came forward again, this time cutting off his angles, forcing him to stay within range. McGregor's left hand fired, a straight shot aimed for Nunes' chin, but she slipped just enough to take the edge off the impact. Her counter came instantly, a looping right hand that clipped McGregor's temple. His feet wobbled for half a second, and Nunes smelled blood. She pressed forward, unleashing a furious combination: hooks, uppercuts, a body shot that made McGregor wince. He staggered back, covering up, but Nunes wasn't letting him breathe. She was overwhelming him, her pace unrelenting. Then came the final shot. A perfectly placed overhand right, launched with full force, crashed against McGregor's jaw. His body went stiff, his legs gave out, and for the first time in years, Conor McGregor collapsed to the canvas in a heap. The referee was already moving in, but Nunes didn't rush. She stood over McGregor, waiting, watching. And then, with the precision of a sniper, she dropped one last hammer fist clean, decisive. The referee dove in, waving it off. It was over. The arena erupted. Some fans roared in triumph, others sat in stunned silence. Amanda Nunes had done the unthinkable. She had stepped into the cage against one of the most notorious strikers in the sport's history and put him away in dominant fashion. McGregor lay there for a moment, his mind catching up with what had just happened. Then, slowly, he sat up, rubbing his jaw, shaking his head with a crooked grin. He looked across the cage at Nunes, and despite the loss, despite the shock of it all, he did something few expected. He clapped. A slow, deliberate applause, nodding as if to say, "You got me." Nunes stepped forward, offering a hand. McGregor took it, pulling himself up. The crowd, still buzzing from what they had just witnessed, watched as the two fighters stood face to face. No bad blood, no lingering tension, just respect between warriors. As the official decision was announced and Nunes' hand was raised, McGregor leaned in, whispering something only she could hear. She laughed, shaking her head before patting him on the chest. Whatever was said, it wasn't for the cameras. The night would go down in history, not just as the fight that shattered expectations, but as the fight that proved skill, heart, and determination mattered more than any preconceived notions. Amanda Nunes had stepped into a battle no one thought she could win and walked out a legend.